We are thrilled to have the general manager of the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles, join us here on CHGO for the first time.
Yes. Good to have you.
Our viewers are very excited, too. So I know we got to talk to you a couple hours ago as well in the press conference setting.
Yep.
I just want to ask this very important question. What's the most ridiculous mock draft you've seen so far already? Because we get these every day, and there's like trades where they trade back like 10 different times, and you have 25 picks in the draft, which sounds kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, sounds cool. I don't know if that would ever happen, but yeah, I try not to look at the mocks. I try to keep a real clear mind on what we're trying to do, but I've seen some crazy stuff out there.
Well, the timing of when a potential trade back could happen I find very interesting. You mentioned this morning that there is a scenario where maybe it makes sense to even make that trade before the start of the league year because you have to make free agent decisions at some point before the draft, but you know having that information ahead of time could be helpful. Is there any scenario where something like that would actually come together this week at the Combine, or is that too soon because you got to get more information?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too soon, but it won't be too far after if it does happen that way. You know, I think the big thing to understand is, and I talked about it earlier today, is the way we set values, you know, for players and where they fit based on what they do and how they would impact our team. So we want to set that up, but you really don't know until you get after the Combine because there's a medical component too. So you don't want to assume that there's so many, say you want to trade back, you know, 5-6 spots, but you got to have 5 or 6 guys that you feel like in that top tier that you think you can still get. What if 1 or 2 come out with some medical concerns, right? What if an interview goes wrong? So we're going to collect that information, kind of put it all on the table when we get back, and that's going to drive us, you know, one way or the other.
Ryan, when you're assessing potential trade options, how important is it for you to potentially get a future first-round pick next year?
Yeah, that's always a good thing. Talked about it a lot so far, but it's flexibility. How can we have flexibility not only this year but also down the road? We want to make sound decisions in free agency for the same reason. So we don't get in a situation where we got to do crazy things just to get by and be restricted, you know, that way. So how can we keep this thing open for a long time, keep adding players, and then there might be a time where, you know, this feels right, let's just, boom, we'll just go all in on it. But there are repercussions. We've seen teams across the league do it. There's a period of time where you're going to have to roll the back and get it right. You do have to pay, you know, your credit card bill at some time. So we're in a good situation. We'll try to stay flexible.
So much conversation around Justin. Yeah. Would the hardest part about making any deal, if you were to pretty shockingly move on from it, we never gave him the perfect setup to see exactly what he could do. I mean, sort of what we're seeing with Jaylon in Philadelphia, where he got his weapons and, you know, they end up in the Super Bowl. Yeah,
that's always in your mind. You know, we're really we focus on player development a lot. So who you are today shouldn't be who you are tomorrow. So we want to pour into Justin and allow him to be the absolute best version of himself. So there's a part that he's got to take care of. There's a part that we have to take care of as a coaching staff to develop. And then as a front office to put talent around him and continue to add talent around him so that he can be successful. So we want to see that process through. Again, I always say this in this situation. We just need to feel comfortable with this class that, you know, it could be good, but are we really comfortable with moving on from him? And at this point, and we still got to go through that group, but that would be no right now. But we got to meet with all these players and sit down and have those conversations.
So I try to put myself in your shoes, as crazy as that sounds. Like I'm extremely, I'm extremely jealous. This guy's 37 years old. He's the general manager of the Chicago Bears. You got all the salary cap money. You got the #1 pick. We got diehard Bears fans watching. Yeah. It's like, is he going to try to hit a home run here? And like trading Fields, that would be the biggest earth shocker you could do, and it would put you in such a huge spotlight if he did that and this quarterback doesn't work out, then he'll never like. So I'm trying to understand the calculus of how risky you're willing to be with your spot and make the Bears successful and do what you think is right. It seems, you know, that's an interesting calculus that you got to come up with.
Yeah, I think you always got to lean on, as a football person, just lean on your values of what you believe in. So if player development is part of that, then we want to see the development process through. And then there's also there's a gut component of it when you see something that you're like, all right, there's something that feels right about this, so we're going to go for it. But there's a lot of pieces that go into it, and we're just working through every one of them to make sure that we're just making sound decisions. And I've said it 100 times, sound decision making. But I really think if you can do that under pressure and under these circumstances, that eventually you're just going to do what's right for the organization and be able to sustain success and have a good roster for a long time.
Sure.
All right, so as much as we're talking about the number one pick and Justin Fields, free agency is coming up.
Yeah.
You literally have to spend money because there's a floor that you have to get to. I find it fascinating how this free agent class kind of looks. We saw how the Roquan Smith situation played out, this idea of premier positions versus premier players. I guess, how do you weigh a potential player like Saquon Barkley, just for example, because there are some top tier, Jacobs, the running back too. There's some top tier running backs. There's maybe not the premier players at wide receivers, for example. How do you weigh that? Because at some point you have to get dudes on the roster too to ultimately win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and that's been one of our big conversations in our draft room and where we meet is how do we want to attack this. I do think where we didn't have the flexibility to do much, we had to do more volume at a certain level based on our situation last year. There might be some time where we can, go to the top and see what that looks like and see if something can be worked out to have impact players on our team. And then there's a good value of just what we call, good starters that we can also do a really good job and have a volume of them to really increase that base layer of good starters on our team. Which only creates competition and everyone, gets better from that situation. So, yeah, that's definitely something we're looking at in terms of the top and premium and non-premium positions. But I think at the end of the day, we need guys that can really move the needle to help us kind of get over the edge because there's a lot of close games we were in, but I think we need just a few more guys that can make those big plays in big moments.
Ryan, we got a chance to talk to Jaylon Johnson in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And he said his goal would be to restructure, get a contract potentially done before the season starts. For you, with everything going on, where does contract extensions fall on the priority list for guys like Johnson, Kmet, and Darnell Mooney?
Yeah, that's part of our philosophy is to retain homegrown talent. When and how that all happens, we'll work through that, this week and when we get back. But that is our belief of ours is we want to keep as many guys homegrown because we know everything about them, right? We know their strengths, weaknesses, where they need to go physically, mentally. So I'm excited, when we do have the opportunity to bring some of those guys back. I think we'll be better because of it.
Going forward, decision on Jaylon or the number one pick, will you sit down, hey, Kevin Warren, this is what I want to do, and is it okay with you, or do you just tell them? How do you anticipate that relationship developing and how that conversation will happen?
Yeah, so I really, so far it's been awesome, getting to know him, and we have a good relationship, and there's a lot of trust there already from our time spent with each other and the research we've done on each other. So I'm fired up about that. But yeah, I did it last year, with Ted and George in our group. We'd sit down and we go through the plan, both college and pro, and where we think it's going to go. And, the support has been outstanding, and that's going to stay the same in terms of their backing of what we're trying to do.
So I'm always fascinated as a new GM comes in. You inherit a bunch of players, right? You were just talking about extending some homegrown talent.
Yep.
But those were guys drafted by a different regime. Are there any examples on this roster right now of guys that maybe you had wrong when you were at Kansas City that maybe you had not as highly graded when you were with the Chiefs, but then you came here and you're like, oh, actually this guy's way better than we thought when I was with the Chiefs?
Not too many, which is actually cool to, have evaluated in one organization and then shift over and see them, in your own building and see them grow. Most of it was pretty correct. I'd say the one that stands out, maybe Teven with tackle to guard would be one. I thought he settled in really well there and shows potential to be, really good at that position. So positionally, that's probably one thing that was a little bit different than I thought. I thought he'd be, tackle. But the versatility was surprising, and it was really helpful for us.
Did anybody jump forward last year like, whoa, Braxton Jones, you had an incredible year, 5th-round pick, left tackle. I'm just naming one. Maybe there's somebody else that, you performed way above where we thought you would be this early in your career?
I'd say Sanborn, just seeing that progress, because it's really difficult. You start You know, you come in, you're fighting just for a spot, you're fighting for special teams, and then, you know, you're on the bench a little bit and you're just playing special teams, and then your number's called. And that's always an interesting setup because you want to see guys kind of rise to the top. And he was one that did a really nice job. He plays faster. That's the tricky thing you got to be careful about with the combine and numbers and all that. The guy plays faster on game day. There's no doubt about it. So I don't really care what he runs in his 40. But the guy has instincts. He plays fast. He's physical. And he showed the ability to be a really good player. So that was one that was really cool to see for sure.
With Roquan eventually getting the extension he got from the Ravens, are you still comfortable with how that all played out?
Yeah, and I'm happy for him. It was $100 million, you know, that deal, 20 APY. So I'm fired up for him. I think it worked out for everybody.
A lot of Bears fans on that one think, like, well, the way he handled himself, that basically sealed him out the door. Is there any truth in the way he sort of positioned himself, which was super aggressive at the time?
No, I don't really get emotional and caught up in that. You know, different tactics, you know, to get different things. So I try to stay level-headed with that. Again, letting the tape, letting the value system play out, and again, trying to do the best thing that we can do to grow this team over time.
You're so grounded. Do you ever, like, get in front of the mirror and, like, pinch yourself like, this is a pretty good career trajectory. I'm pretty proud of where I'm at here and get to do what you get to do every day?
Yeah, I probably should do it more. I'm just hungry to do the absolute best I can, you know, and allow our Chicago fans to be fired up about their team. Just reflecting on my past, I've been through this. I've had the first pick before and been a part of it. I wasn't the decision maker at the time, but, you know, you take your kids to school and you're around town and you hear, like, we want to be really good and we're sick of being in this situation. And there's no better feeling than that climb out of it. And it takes, trust me, it takes a little bit longer than what you think to get to the very top. But when it happens, it's a blast, and your fan base is just proud of their team, and they want to show up. They want to be loud. They want to be supportive. So I just try to stay level through that and do the best thing that we can. And I try to really separate myself from the pressure too, because I think at that point you can get caught up in making some bad decisions based on trying to do something right now. And there's a time and place for that, but to make sound decisions, I think you got to separate yourself and really lean on your team and your process.
I always got one little quick one for it, but they always showed you in the box, and, you know, you were wanting to win games last year.
Yeah.
But did you at least smile a little bit when the Texans got in the end zone? And
That's a weird setup, man. Like, our game ended, that last game ended before the end of the Houston game. So when I left my box, the station had changed to that game. But I went down to the locker room and just wanted to be with the guys because I know, you know, they were hurting. It was a long season. That's tough. And really, I heard what happened, but I just wasn't in the mood for it. I got in the car. I had to get home, and a neighbor drives by. And he's like, "Hey, congratulations on the first pick." And I'm like, do we celebrate this right now? Like, I don't know if it's the time and place, but
well, the fans were celebrating.
we trust we did for you because I mean,
I just try to see. A lot of us do. We try. Each game is its own little space, and you live in that moment, and then you deal with everything outside once you exit that. So, in the moment, I wasn't really there. But now, as I talked earlier, the opportunity is really big for us, and if we capitalize on it, which I know we will, we can do some really cool things over the next few years.
Well, we're going to let you go. We do want to let you know that we have a guy on our staff named Greg Braggs, who's a bricklayer, and he's got this saying, brick by brick, that we've taken to this show. And I don't know if you use that mentality, but he wants you to know that you're more than welcome to borrow it.
Absolutely. I got a little. I think I talked about it on my exit. I got a brick on my desk. Everybody in the organization does, and that's the way we're going to do it. It's just brick by brick and get this thing where it needs to be.
Awesome. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us
Appreciate
today.
you, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.